As I mentioned, Ron Paul has just dropped into the studio. We're most fortunate. He's, of course, a very well-known figure across North America. A lot of Canadians knew him from his three-time candidacy for the presidency as the Libertarian leader in the United States, the godfather, if I can call it that, of the Tea Party movement. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
We've just got a couple of minutes with you. First of all, the sequestration, the budget cuts that went into effect last Friday, the stock markets didn't go into a swoon. The world didn't come to an end. The sun came up. Was this much ado about nothing in your mind?
Yeah, it was just some fear tactics. And this is the way, I don't know whether politics works this way in Canada, but in the United States, you have to beat the drums of fear to get the people to capitulate. And, the world's coming to an end. Foreign policy things, they're going to attack us, so they're going to bomb us. There's weapons of mass destruction, so we go and do things we shouldn't be doing. Financially, the end of the world's coming, so therefore we have to pump in $15 trillion through the Federal Reserve to bail out the banks, this sort of thing. This was part of this. This was an effort by those who really wanted to raise taxes and say, the end of the world's coming because of this cut. Well, there weren't any cuts. They're only cutting the proposed increases. And, if we have baseline budgeting, which is a terrible way to budget things, everything is automatic increase. So the automatic increase over the next 10 years would be $2.5 trillion, automatic increase. And if sequestration would go through, which it won't, it would be $2.4 trillion. So they keep, deceiving people. So the one way I think people should be able to handle this is say, okay, you don't want any cuts and, I'm a fiscal conservative. I'll compromise with you. Let's just freeze the budget. It's freeze it. And, okay, freezing doesn't sound bad. You mean I can get everything I got last year? Yeah. But that isn't the way it works. They really think that it is natural for government to expand at a percentage of 7% per year, and it usually goes over that because there's always an emergency. That's the other thing about sequestration. If it goes through, let's say it goes through and they actually cut something, there is always an emergency. One time in the 1980s, they cut back food stamps, and they go, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? But they cut it back anyway. At the end of 10 months, they ran out of money, so they had an emergency funding thing. So you just have emergency funding. So it's a lot of talk about nothing. The markets perceived it correctly. They did not get nervous about the sequestration.
If I actually told you that in the city of Toronto, which is a big city, it's the fourth largest in North America, that we had last year a city budget that actually was less than the year before, would you find that to be something that would tickle your fancy?
Yeah, it sure would. We need to learn that lesson.
So let me ask you about something else, Keystone, the pipeline. I mean, we're obviously interested in it here because we have natural resources we would love to sell to our friends in the United States. They're buying oil less so than they used to from other countries that are perhaps less friendly, and it gets held up by a series of regulatory and other things. I think you've spoken out in favor of this.
Yes, I'm in favor of these things being solved in the market rather than political. I always resent the idea that the president, our president, can make or break it. Well, where did he get all this power? It should be in the marketplace. I mean, there might be a discussion about going across, boundaries or something like this. But the whole purpose of our interstate commerce clause, which should be applied to our international borders, is that we're supposed to reduce barriers, allow goods and services to travel back and forth. So for me, just economically speaking, I think it would be fantastic. I would like to see a lot less politicization of this. Now, I'll get the politics out of it. That would be much better. But it's turned into a political football because, we have so many pipes in our country, and I'm sure you have pipes up here. I mean, the number percentage-wise, it would be interesting to know, what percent increase in pipes this would be. But this is...
You're kind of making the point if people are worried about this one, they should have started worrying a long time ago.
Yeah, like 100 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me this, the Republicans in the U.S., and I realize you'd be saying, well, look, they should actually elect libertarians, but the Republicans, I mean, if they want to have a chance to win the presidency at some point, they've lost a couple of times now. What's the answer for them? I mean, I presume you'd be more to the kind of be true to yourselves as opposed to those who are saying they should move more to the so-called center, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I don't think a whole lot about political parties. I think it's just a tool. I don't think our parties are different. Their rhetoric is different, and one's supposed to care about the poor, and one's supposed to care about balanced budget. And but Both parties support the war activities overseas. They both support the financial system, the central banking, the Federal Reserve, and deficits. Neither one's really care about that. So I work more in trying to convince people that government intervention, too many government regulations, paper money is bad, and that we should change it. And when we change people's mind, we actually change both parties. So both parties are Keynesian big spender interventionists now, and I'd like to change it where both parties would support certain viewpoints. And I've had a minor success with this by calling attention to the problems of the Federal Reserve. So the coalition is made up of Republicans and Democrats and say, yeah, that's logical. We ought to at least know what our central bank is doing. So I believe in coalition building, but that's quite a bit different than each side giving up half of what they believe in. I want to work with progressive Democrats and believe in civil liberties and think that we could spend a lot less money in the military, and work with conservatives who happen to believe in free market economics and sound money.
All right, so you've run 3 times. Is there time for another go in 2000 and what year will it be, 16?
I don't think that's going to happen. I think that...
How come? A lot of people, look, there'd be a lot of people up in Canada. We tend to be a bit more small L liberal than you, although there's a lot of people who have a libertarian streak in them saying, get government out of the way, but they would find you refreshing because at least you kind of call it the way it is and say some things about government and big bloated in the way government, and that they would endorse some of that.
Well, if I run again, you have to have one rule that the people who decide who the president is, they have to be 35 years or younger. Because I think I could win that vote.
Maybe
Young people are very attractive to this libertarian viewpoint of, it's your life, it's your money, you're responsible. Government shouldn't be telling you how you run your personal life, and they shouldn't tell you how to spend your money. We fight too many wars, and it doesn't make sense that if you're short money, that the government can just run up debt and print the money. So it's a very attractive philosophy. But no, I think that I'm going to just do my traveling around and go where people ask me to come.
You can still have a lot of influence.
Well, I don't know.
Doing that. Final question, Ron Paul, before we let you go, and we thank you very much for spending a moment with us, and that is, are you an optimist? I mean, about things, notwithstanding that, government isn't kind of quickly moving out of the way, notwithstanding what you said about the existing parties, both standing, in your view, for more or less the same thing in their own way. Are you an optimist about the future of, I'll say, North America, because we're in this with you, economically and otherwise?
Yeah, I tend to be very optimistic, even though last night I talked at George Washington University. I probably spent 80%, 90% of my time talking about the problem, but I was finished with, it's not that complex. These problems can be solved. You don't have to sacrifice anything. All you have to do is demand your liberty, demand your freedoms, and these problems can be solved. For instance, I've had, I think they're addressing the subject more so now. The Federal Reserve is on the table for discussion. But the other thing I've talked about over the years is the detriment of the war on drugs. It's just been horrible. I mean, the prisons are full of violent criminals, and that's just bothering. But I think it's changing. I think we're going to see. I think we've actually at the point that we've past the peak of that, and we're winning the battle with that because it makes no sense. We're spending trillions of dollars on only compounding our problems. So, no, I'm an optimist. I believe that I see the disintegration of the system that we have today, just as the major event in my lifetime was the disintegration of communism. It was a failed, flawed system. And this system that we have, that we generally endorse throughout the West,
big government, big bloated,
whether it's our
huge
continent or even Europe,
complex, big deficits.
It's interventionism, it's Keynesianism, and deficits.
That's going to go the way of the dodo bird too.
It's done. That's why Europe is struggling, and that's why we're struggling. And that's why Democrats hate Republicans. When they had a lot of money and they could borrow, and the credit was good, they were pretty good buddies because they voted for each other's stuff. But now it's different, and it's the pie is shrinking. But the system has to change. That's where I'm optimistic, and that's why I get really excited about going to campuses, because there's a whole generation of individuals right now who are looking at this and say, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, good luck with your visit here. We thank you very much for dropping in to see us, and we welcome you to Canada, and we'll see how the world unfolds. But nice to hear somebody expressing an optimistic view.
Thank you.
Ron Paul, the godfather of the Tea Party, a presidential candidate, a libertarian, and a surprise visitor to the live drive today. Thanks very much for coming in.